Chapter 7. Believing different things on different days. The following is a quote from Robert Anton Wilson. Everything that gets into your brain affects your reality tunnel, your worldview, or your belief system, which I abbreviate BS. The two major things I've been trying to teach in all of my books is, never believe fully in anybody else's BS. I don't care who it is, don't swallow all of their belief system totally. The second rule is like unto the first. Don't believe totally in your own BS, which means that any belief system or reality tunnel you've got right now is going to have to be revised and updated as you continue to apprehend new events later in time. End quote. In this chapter, I will be looking at the idea of cognitive harmony from a different angle. In music, harmony is the ordering of stacked notes into complementary patterns. Likewise, cognitive harmony is my term for the ability to function well with multiple belief systems in the same individual. Cognitive dissonance, defined here as the stress caused by conflicting beliefs in an individual, cannot be fully relieved by reducing one's life to one simple set of rules. Nor can it be resolved by ignoring everything that doesn't fit in with one's personal narrative. No matter how inconvenient it is, reality always has a way of crashing the party. In psychology, this behavior of shutting out contradictory information is referred to as the distortion defense mechanism, a gross reshaping of external reality to meet internal needs. As previously discussed, the world is filled with more information than is able to be processed by a single individual. Similarly, as a society, we have not succeeded in generating a unified theory with which to explain everything. Therefore, given the many tasks and roles we must undertake, the only path left to us is to switch between belief systems. I propose that having multiple belief systems is actually the normal state of a healthy, functional human being, and that trying to operate with only one belief system is in a large part what causes cognitive dissonance. Before I go any further, I must explain what I mean by belief. The type of beliefs I am interested in are those beliefs that one acts out in the world as if they were true. I am less interested in what people say they think is true, especially if they act differently. Very often we aren't fully aware of our own beliefs. For instance, someone might say that money is the root of all evil, but still spend a lot of their time trying to acquire as much of it as they can. Their behavior betrays their narrative. To use money is to believe in it. Cognitive dissonance can also occur if an individual's beliefs differ from the ideology of a group to which they belong. For instance, they might be asked to behave in a certain way at work, which conflicts with their personal principles. We can see this frequently in our modern society when issues such as environmentalism clash with capitalism. For example, a fast food company might decide to switch from plastic to wooden cutlery in order to appear more sustainable to its environmentally concerned customer base. Even though everyone in the company might believe that this is a good move, it is possible that a shareholder's contract might prevent it. Often companies are legally bound, via lawyer spells, to try their best to produce a profit for their shareholders, and can be sued if they fail to do so. Cases like this are not only breeding grounds for cognitive dissonance amongst their employees, but also show that a company's apparent belief system can be quite separate from the belief system of the people who run the company. Likewise, many people attend church on Sunday and then behave in an unchristian manner the rest of the week. Consider the Italian mafioso, often highly Catholic in personal belief, yet at the same time an organized crime group that breaks multiple Christian commandments and principles. I come from New Zealand, a country with a statistically high degree of atheism and agnosticism. Many New Zealanders report a distrust of religion, and our country has a low church attendance in comparison with its traditionally Christian past. As a teenager in the late 90s, I spent a year in Germany as an exchange student. Church attendance was still common for German families. Even though I was agnostic, I attended a Catholic church with my host family and considered it part of the cultural experience. As part of my curiosity to understand the culture, I would ask people if they went to a church or a mosque and what sort of religion they followed. The answers from the Germans were almost universally, yes, I go to a Catholic church, or yes, I go to a Lutheran Protestant church, or yes, I attend a mosque. Something seemed off, though. If I probed further, the same individuals would often reveal that they were agnostic about the existence of God, or some other aspect of their religion, such as the infallibility of the Pope. I started adding the question, but do you believe in God? To my surprise, the answer was usually, oh, I'm not sure if there is a God or not. Unlike the New Zealanders of the late 90s, the Germans attended church as a matter of tradition, regardless of their individual personal beliefs. The German churches flourished undeterred by their widespread agnosticism. Despite what many non-religious people think, religions usually accept a certain amount of agnosticism amongst their participants. Attendance and participation are what count if you are trying to keep a church going. There are people who claim to live under one set of rules all of the time. Considering the complexity of the world, I think these people are either not telling us the truth, not telling themselves the truth, or are otherwise in a near constant state of stress at trying to squeeze a complex world into a belief-shaped hole. More nefarious still are the cults that prey upon this type of stress. Some set an impossibly high spiritual goal and then use the guilt of not living up to that standard as leverage to control their members. On the flip side, if used in a positive way, the pursuit of an unobtainable perfection can be used to provide an endless source of inspiration, like a guiding star. As long as one knows that while one can perpetually improve, one can never actually achieve an ideal state. Allowing oneself to slip up and then learn from the experience and move on is healthy. Forever judging oneself or someone else for not reaching a bar set too high is destructive. Another way to explain believing different things on different days is through the concept of collective beliefs. This has been written about by the social scientists Margaret Gilbert and André Orléan. They seek to explain, much like my earlier fast food company example, that a group may hold a belief which causes its members to behave a certain way, even if none of those members hold that belief individually. The following is a quote from the paper, What is a Collective Belief by André Orléans. If you'd like the footnotes in full, please purchase the book. Foreign exchange brokers, like everyone else, may know perfectly well that the currency is undervalued and yet continue to sell it. What counts for them when they operate on the market is not their opinion of the true value of the currency, insofar as they can estimate it, but how they believe the market is going to behave. Brokers make profits on a market by correctly predicting the evolutions of group opinion. This is the rule of the game. As a broker, however much I believe in a rise in the euro, I'm powerless when I see all around me that the other operators on the exchange market are selling euros. For the same reason, even if I judge that the euro deserves to be worth more against the dollar, I still hesitate about buying the European currency. If I'm the only buyer up against 50 brokers that are selling, I'm sure to get my fingers burned. I don't necessarily follow my own personal convictions. End quote. As one can infer, it is quite possible that the majority of the 50 brokers mentioned in the quote might believe that the euro is undervalued and yet still behave as if they believe the dollar to be stronger. They not only have their own personal beliefs, but also their belief about the group belief of the market. This is a common situation that can arise in any group. All that is required to relieve one of the cognitive dissonance caused by the group's belief being different to one's own is a rationalization. As the broker explains, he would lose money if he were to act on his own values. Therefore, his hands are tied. Another example might be seen in a member of a political party who is trying to get a particular bill to pass. They might strike a quid pro quo deal with the rest of their party to vote yes on a different bill in return for support on the one they care most about. From the point of view of the vote count, only the party belief can be observed and not the individuals. No wonder these groups seem to behave like they have their own will, separate from individual values or sometimes from common sense. The group behaves as if it is an entity in its own right, and sometimes that is the best way to think of it. We will explore this idea further later on in the book. When an individual is at odds with the beliefs of a group entity, rather than fighting as one person against the entire group, it can be more effective to create a new group entity in order that the battle might be fought at the same level of abstraction. Fun examples of this can be found in New Zealand's history, with satirical political movements such as the Wizard of New Zealand's own Imperial British Conservative Party or the Makilikati Serious Party. Both of them humorous political parties that ran for parliament partly in jest and partly in protest. Belief as a tool. Alice laughed. "There's no use in trying," she said. "One can't believe in possible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was younger, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." End quote. From Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, 1898. Once a magician has accepted that it is quite ordinary for a single individual to hold multiple conflicting beliefs, they can then turn this to their own advantage. One of the underlying principles behind magic, as laid out by the writer and chaos magician Peter J. Carroll, is the idea that belief can be used as a tool. If you don't like what you are getting from your life, consider changing your belief system. My term for the ability of an individual to juggle different belief systems in order to fulfill different roles is spiritual code switching. Code switching is a concept I have borrowed from linguistics. It refers to the ability of a person to switch between thinking and communicating in one language to another instantly, often within the confines of a single conversation. Likewise, spiritual code switching is the ability to change spiritual frameworks like tools, as if one were exchanging a spanner for a screwdriver. Just as one reality tunnel can highlight aspects of one's environment while rendering others invisible, one belief system can open up opportunities for certain behaviors and action whilst rendering others impossible. Quote, "The master role is the magician. He knows he is acting, but there is still no greater role." End quote. The Wizard of New Zealand quoted that to me himself in 2019 while we were sitting at his dining table. It's part of an address he gave when he was appointed the official wizard at the University of New South Wales in 1969. The following is another quote from Robert Anton Wilson. "Once you have a belief system, everything that comes in either gets ignored if it doesn't fit the belief system, or it gets distorted enough so that it can fit into the belief system. You gotta be continually revising your map of the world." End quote. There is another matter that must be confronted by both the psychologist and the magician before belief can successfully be harnessed for change. In Western culture, it is usually taken for granted that thought precedes action. Many self-help and therapy modalities seek to first control thought in order that they may positively affect behavior and habits. However, this is often not quite right. We often find out how we think and what we believe by our habits and our actions. These can be unconscious. For instance, how do you know you are angry? Do you have an angry thought and then turn red? I think it's often the case that we have a body response first. We often find out we are angry because of an increased heart rate, flow of blood to the head, or tensing of the muscles. In psychology, this concept is called embodied cognition. One of the first explanations of this effect was laid out by William James in his essay, What is an Emotion? 1884. This is the same William James who laid the foundation for the philosophy of pragmatism, which is core to this book. Quote, "Common sense says we lose our fortune, are sorry and weep. We meet a bear, are frightened and run. We are insulted by a rival, are angry and strike." The hypothesis here to be defended says that this order of sequence is incorrect, that the one mental state is not immediately induced by the other, that the bodily manifestations must first be interposed between, and that the more rational statement is that we feel sorry because we cry, angry because we strike, afraid because we tremble, and not that we cry, strike, or tremble because we are sorry, angry, or fearful, as the case may be. Without the bodily states following on the perception, the latter would be purely cognitive in form, pale, colourless, destitute of emotional warmth. We might then see the bear and judge it best to run, receive the insult and deem it right to strike, but we could not actually feel afraid or angry. End quote. Embodied cognition is still a relevant theory in psychology today. Often we get the thought and feeling around the wrong way, thinking that we act on thoughts rather than is often the case, our thoughts explain our actions to us. The following is a quote from a scientific paper. If you would like the full footnotes, please purchase the book. Quote, Gazzaniga, 2000, has suggested that people explain their behaviors by fabricating stories. In his research, brain-damaged patients who could not explain their behaviors accurately were nevertheless quick to provide plausible, though obviously false, explanations for their actions. More recent research has demonstrated a similar phenomenon in normally functioning adults. Johansson et al., 2005. This work employed sleight of hand to dupe participants into explaining decisions they did not make. Most participants failed to notice that these were not their own decisions. Furthermore, they had no problem providing quick and elaborate explanations for why they had made them, even though the explanations could not have possibly been true. The general pattern thus seems to be that people are unaware of their own behaviors. If the conscious self cannot recognize its own actions, it is unlikely that it controls them. The paper is by Morcella, Equiel and Pullman, and Andrew T. from 2014. End quote. Because of this, not only can one affect change in oneself or a willing subject by thought control, but also, often more effectively, by behaving differently. Acting as if you believe something to be true can be a quicker way to change one's inner beliefs than trying to think differently. This is one of the primary factors that underlies ritual as a magical concept. For instance, psychological tests show that people usually value a group more if they have undergone a difficult initiation rite before they are allowed to join. No wonder initiation is core to so many magical traditions, from shamanism to the Golden Dawn. Quote, Elliot, Aronson, and Judson Mills, 1959, studied whether the cognitive dissonance created by an initiation process could explain how much commitment students felt to a group they were part of. In their experiment, female college students volunteered to join a group that would be meeting regularly to discuss various aspects of the psychology of sex. According to random assignment, some of the women were told that they would be required to perform an embarrassing procedure before they could join the group. They were asked to read some obscene words and some sexually orientated passages from a novel in public. Whereas other women did not have to go through this initiation. Then all the women got a chance to listen to the group's conversation, which turned out to be very boring. Arison and Mills found that the women who had gone through the embarrassing experience subsequently reported more liking for the group than those who had not. And Gerard and Mathewson, 1966, found that having to take some electrical shocks as part of an initiation process had the same effect. Arison and Mills argued that the more effort an individual expends to become a member of the group, e.g., a severe initiation, the more he and she will become committed to the group in order to justify the effort put in during the initiation. The idea is that the effort creates dissonant cognitions, e.g., I did all this work to join the group, which are then justified by creating more consonant ones, e.g., okay, this group really is pretty fun. The women who spent little effort to get into the group were able to see the group as the dull and boring conversation that it was. The women who went through the more severe initiation, however, succeeded in convincing themselves that the same discussion was a worthwhile experience. When we put in effort for something, an initiation, a big purchase price, or some of our precious time, we will likely end up liking the activity more than we would have if the effort had been less. Even the effort of having to fill out a purchase agreement for a product rather than having the salesperson do it for you creates commitment to the purchase and a greater likelihood of staying in the deal. Cialdini, 2001. That was from The Principles of Social Psychology, Stangor, 2011. For the full footnotes, please purchase my book. Perhaps this offers a partial explanation as to why ritual is such a common part of traditional magic, from a witch doctor's blessing to singing hymns in a church to an orientation party for freshmen at a university. A magician can experiment with this phenomenon. Things to try. Point 1. When struggling with destructive belief, try behaving as if the opposite is true, and then seeing if a new, more healthy belief follows. For instance, when confronting imposter syndrome, the fear that you might not compare well to others of a similar skill level, a fake it till you make it approach might allow one to overcome personal doubts. Point 2. Ritualize beliefs through costumes. Wear a business suit and carry a clipboard, a janitor's coveralls, bucket and mop, or a high-vis vest and hard hat, and see if that grants you access to places you don't normally have access to. What you wear and how you behave determines how people treat you and whether they pay attention to you at all. Point 3. Adopt the attitude that everyone has something to teach you for a week. See if by the end of the week you have learned some new things. The following week, adopt the attitude that everyone else is a fool. See if by the end of the week you have discovered the loose ends and logical fallacies in most people's pet ideas. Consider the opportunities and obstacles each belief has created, and consider each a tool that can be switched out at any given time. If you have enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe and share this video. And if you would like, purchase a copy of my book at the links in the video description. Thank you.